Wow, so beautiful to be in the presence of God and just to remember how good he is. He is so radically generous to us. He is so, so good to us. And you know, Jesus said when he came to earth in John chapter 10, he said that I've come to give you life in all fullness. Jesus' promise to us is that we would experience life in fullness, abundant life, a flourishing life. The very first thing that God said to Abraham when he called his people all those years ago, Abraham, the forefather of our faith, he said to Abraham, you're going to be blessed. That's right at the heart of God, that we would be blessed to be a blessing to all those people around us. In Genesis 12, the Lord said to Abraham, leave your native country, your relatives and your father's family, and go to the land I will show you. Not an easy mission right there, to leave everyone and everything and to go to the land that God would show him. He said, I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who treat you with contempt. All the families on earth will be blessed through you. What an incredible promise that God gives to us, his people, that all the families on earth will be blessed by us, his people. We're blessed to be a blessing. Blessing is right at the heart of who God is. He's just so good. He can't stop blessing us. So what does it mean to live a blessed life? Well, I don't know if you've been on social media recently. There's all sorts of answers there about living a blessed life. On social media, often being blessed means having a ridiculously incredible life where you run ultra marathons every weekend, you have a perfect home, perfect spouse, perfect children, perfect holidays, #blessed, living a blessed life. I don't know, does that ring a bell? I think in our world, being blessed looks like having everything you want. But do you know what? That is not the gospel that Jesus lived or preached. Newsflash, not the gospel. Jesus actually addressed the question of what it means to be blessed and to live a blessed life over 2,000 years ago in his Sermon on the Mount teaching, and specifically the passage that we know as the Beatitudes. And that teaching is just as relevant now as it was then. Both Matthew and Luke give accounts of this teaching in their Gospels. A teaching that provides a spiritual framework for living a blessed life, a flourishing life, a life that surpasses anything that the world has to offer. That's what we're invited into, a flourishing life. And it can only be discovered with Jesus. So we'll read together this passage from Matthew 5, verses 3 to 12. Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him and he began to teach them. A little aside here. Jesus is often likened to Moses because Moses climbed up Mount Sinai to get the law, the instructions from God for God's people on how they were to live in the promised land that God was inviting them to. Moses climbed up and he got the 10 Commandments. And here's Jesus climbing a mountain all those years later. He's not getting something different. He's actually giving instructions to his disciples in how to interpret the law, how to live with the law in our hearts. Jesus was the fulfillment of the law, and he was interpreting God's instructions for the people then and the people now, all of us now. And Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. I don't know. I don't think we would normally put those things together, that you're blessed when you're being persecuted, when you're being falsely treated. And yet this is what Jesus is saying. And these words are more than happy sentiments that we read out at funerals, or we send verses to one another who are struggling. These words are instructions for life, the life of a follower of Jesus. Not rules, but invitations to learn how to live a flourishing life, an abundant life. And this passage has been interpreted in so many ways by the church throughout all the ages, and often made this teaching fairly meaningless. And there's been a recent awakening for scholars to go right back to the context that Jesus spoke these words in, and to reclaim the original meaning of what Jesus meant, of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. What are the identity markers, if you like, of being a Christian? Jesus is talking about being blessed. And that word blessed can also be translated as happy. It comes from the Greek word makarios, which is a state of being that God invites us into regardless of the circumstances. Regardless of whether we experience good things on the outside, regardless of whether we're in a difficult season, there is always joy for those who love Jesus. There's always a state of happiness. That's what Jesus is saying. A state for now, for us to discover now in our broken world, which will last for the whole of eternity. Because one day, Jesus will come again. When Jesus came to earth, he ushered in the kingdom of heaven. He said, the kingdom is here. The rule and reign of God is available here. But it's not here in all its fullness. And our job as followers of Jesus is to extend the kingdom here on earth. And one day, Jesus will return. There'll be no more pain, no more sickness. And all of those who love Jesus, who have given their hearts to him, will go with Jesus for the whole of eternity. So there are two parts to each of these statements that Jesus makes. The first is the identity of those being blessed. That's what Jesus is talking about. And the second is the reason for it, why they're blessed. And Jesus upends the conventional benchmark of blessing. That teaching was radical then, and it's radical now. It was relevant then, and it's just as relevant now. Jesus is talking about experiencing flourishing and happiness and abundance in a way that nothing else can give us. He's talking about pure joy, pure goodness, pure blessing, where there's no fear, there's no anxiety attached to it, no lack. And the way that we get to it is contrary to the rest of the world. The way we get to that state of happiness is when we come to Jesus with nothing, when we grieve, when we're weak, when we're humble, when we're mistreated, when we're persecuted. That's when we'll be blessed, Jesus says. It's radical. He says that living differently, living as a follower of Jesus, will mean that we're persecuted for our faith. But you know, God doesn't invite us to do anything that he isn't prepared to do himself. This is our Jesus. Jesus lived a radically different life and death from anyone around him. In fact, onlookers might say that Jesus failed. He failed in the world's eyes. He didn't die with a flashy title and loads of money and a huge car car or whatever it was in that context. He didn't actually have a wife or children. He was mocked and betrayed and killed. There was nothing actually about his appearance that made him stand out. We're told in Isaiah 53, there was nothing beautiful or majestic about his appearance, nothing to attract us to him. Jesus wasn't a supermodel with supermodel looks. He was despised and rejected, a man of sorrows, acquainted with deepest grief. And we thought his troubles were a punishment from God, a punishment for his own sins. Our Jesus, betrayed, mocked, killed, persecuted. And yet Jesus changed everything. He changed everything for us, all that follow on behind. Jesus is the greatest hero of all time. He's our savior. He's our friend. He's our redeemer. He is the one who was radically generous. He was radically generous to give up his life for us, even when we were still enemies from God. That is the level of radical generosity that Jesus displayed on the cross. And on the cross, and in his resurrection, Jesus overcame evil once and for all. Victory was secured. And one day we're going to see it in all its fullness. But in the meantime, we've got a job to do. Paul says in 2 Corinthians 5, verse 17, anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old life is gone and a new life has begun. We're invited to live differently than we lived before we knew Jesus. And all of this is a gift from God who brought us back to himself through Christ. And God has given us this task of reconciling people to him. That's the job that we've been given, to reconcile people to God. Derek Morphew, who's an amazing vineyard theologian, says this: I am essentially a new person, saved by grace, nothing to do with our own doing that we're saved by grace, and transformed by Christ's power. I live from that identity into obedience. What he's saying is the first thing that we have to grasp hold of is that we have a new identity when we belong to Jesus. And then God begins to transform our hearts. We don't do it ourselves. It's the work of God's Spirit in us. There's heart transformation that takes place where what we think, what we believe, what we do starts to change. And we can only live a kingdom life and outwork the values and the ethics of the Beatitudes, of those invitations from Jesus, if we're deeply rooted in our identity as a child of God. That's the only way we can live out of that we know who we belong to. Otherwise, it would simply be impossible. We wouldn't be able to muster enough willpower to do the things that we're called to do, to love the people who are unlovable, to love our enemies. But the more that we're transformed, the more we understand our part to play in the mission of God. Because our mission is not actually about ourselves. We're not just blessed. We're blessed to be a blessing. That's our mission. We're blessed to reach those who don't know Jesus, those who are lost, whether they realize it or not. We're blessed to reconcile people to God. And that's the way Jesus says that we store up kingdom treasure. When we die here on earth, we're not going to take anything with us, but we can store up treasure in heaven. We do that when we are obedient to the mission that God's given us to do. So with these Beatitudes, there are 8 Beatitudes. There's a little bit of a difference depending on how many you count, but most scholars believe there are 8 Beatitudes. And the first 4 are about the progression of a disciple's relationship with God. One where we come spiritually empty and we start to hunger for justice. And then the final 4 are all about our interaction with the world around us. So the first 4 are about our heart, really, and the next 4 are all about our mission. We're going to have a quick run through of them. The first one, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Luke actually says blessed are the poor. Matthew says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Whether it's material poverty or whether it's spiritual poverty, the invitation from Jesus is the same. He invites us to come empty-handed, fully surrendered, giving up everything that we have to him as we come before him. We lay down everything that we carry. James, in his book, talks about the perils of wealth. You see, here in our Western world, we can be inoculated against sickness and poverty because we have money, and we falsely think that we're in control of our lives, and we're not. Jesus invites us to come with what we have and to lay it down, to surrender all we have before God. When we think we're in control, we're so easily tricked into being prideful. Well, I deserve all this, it's all mine. We get distracted trying to keep up with everything we own, rather than being distracted by Jesus and his mission and what he's inviting us to. So the first invitation is that we would come fully surrendered and empty-handed before Jesus. The second, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. When we're talking about mourning and grieving, Jesus isn't just talking about people who've lost someone. This verse is often misquoted at funerals as it simply means that. Jesus wasn't talking about that. What Jesus was saying is that the more that we realize our need of God, which happens when we spend time in his presence, the more we realize our need of him, the more we realize our own lack, our failure, our sin. And so another word that could be used here is repentance. Blessed are those who repent, who recognize their need of God. We are invited into this intimate, growing relationship with Jesus. And it only is intimate when we come with vulnerability and honesty about the state of our hearts. And we experience God's comfort in the middle of that. Jesus goes on to say, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. We don't hear that word very much in this day and age, the meek. Who are the meek? The meek are the humble, the vulnerable. The meek are not the weak. Actually, Justin Bowers, a theologian, said that meekness is power that is restrained, not retained. It's not that we can't use that power, it's that we choose not to use that power. That's what meekness is. Martin Lloyd-Jones says, meekness is a true view of oneself, expressing itself with respect to others in attitude and conduct. We're invited to be meek. You see, the earth, under Satan's control at the moment, promotes jealousy and manipulation and competition. Like, do anything you can to get your own way so that you can climb over one another to get what you want. Jesus invites us to something entirely different. He says, be humble, be honest, hold your tongue, hold your anger, take it to God instead. That's what meekness looks like. Then he says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Now, this word righteousness has actually been mistranslated by many Bible translations over the years. What Jesus was actually talking about is justice. And it comes from the Greek word diakousene. I'm not Greek, sorry for the mispronunciation, but that's the Greek word. It's on the screen. Diakonos is a servant or attendant, someone who performs tasks for others. And right at the heart of it is justice. And the reason that the church has mistranslated this is that it can mean righteousness as well. But what Jesus was actually talking about here isn't just about our personal relationship with God. Sometimes we're tricked into thinking it's just me and God. Me and God, I don't need anyone else. My church is wherever I am and I'm just with God. Jesus is saying, no. You're blessed when you hunger for justice, a justice that pervades into every single relationship we have. It's so important that we have our relationship with God and we stand in right standing, righteous relationship with him, but then it outflows into every single relationship around us. That's what hungering for God's justice means. It means that we have God's heart for every single relationship, that we operate in the way that God would if he was with us. Much easier said than done. It means that we love radically and generously. We're quick to forgive. We put others first. We stand up for those who don't have a voice. That's what hungering for justice looks like. And salvation and justice go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. So those first 4 invitations are about the kind of person that Jesus is transforming us to, the kind of heart that he invites us to have. Surrendered, empty-handed, repentant, meek, hungering for God's justice in all of our relationships. And the next 4 are all about what we do with our transformed hearts. Jesus says, blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Mercy looks like love and forgiveness. What Jesus is saying is, keep on showing love and forgiveness, regardless of whether people deserve it or not. The more that we give mercy to others, the more that we have. It's one of the kingdom principles. The more we give away, the more we keep getting to keep on giving away. Jesus is saying we're blessed when we're radical forgivers. He says we're blessed when we're pure in heart, for then we'll see God. Being pure in heart means having an intimate relationship with Jesus. It's not about showing off in front of others. It's not about, look at me, I go to church every Sunday, I'm such a great Christian. That doesn't matter at all. It's about what happens in the secret place when the door's closed. What does my relationship with Jesus look like then, when no one's watching and no one knows? We're blessed when we pursue intimacy with Jesus, and the only person that really knows that we're doing that is Jesus himself. He says we're blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. There is a difference between peacemaking and peacekeeping. Being a peacemaker means that we walk into messy, chaotic, painful situations where God is not, and we bring God's Spirit with us to bring change. That's what we're invited to. We're not invited to just keep the peace, not say anything because we don't want to offend anyone, not speak the truth in love. We're not invited to do that. We're invited to be peacemakers. That means that we walk in shoes of peace. That's what Paul tells us in Ephesians 6. When we're talking about the spiritual armor, we walk in shoes of peace, carrying the Spirit of God, of which one of those fruits of the Spirit is peace, giving shalom, giving out flourishing. We are the people who are not afraid to go into painful, messy places where the Spirit of God is not, because we know confidently our identity in God and we know the authority we carry to make a difference. How else will broken people living in darkness know that God loves them if we don't go to those places and tell them? We're blessed when we walk in shoes of peace into the messy, chaotic places that God's Spirit is not. And then finally, we're blessed. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, because of doing justice, because of doing what is right on behalf of others who don't have a voice. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. We're told that we'll be persecuted. The world will hate the kingdomized. The world is longing for us to just fit in and not make a fuss. But we're called to live differently, and we'll be persecuted for that. In some countries, right now, people are martyred for their faith. So much easier for us to hide behind our faith here. No one has to know. I'm not going to say anything at work. Just don't want anyone to know that I'm a Christian. But Jesus invites us to live so differently that people will know, because we're doing justice differently. We're loving people differently. And then Jesus goes on to use these 2 metaphors, salt and light. He's essentially saying, you can't be wishy-washy. You've got to be like salt. Salt brings flavor. Light brings light to darkness. Light either shines in the darkness or it doesn't. There's either light or there isn't. There's either salt or there isn't. We can't be wishy-washy. We've got to live differently and be noticed. And here in our church family at Grace Vineyard Church, we're called to be a beacon of grace and hope in a broken world, right here in our city. That's what we're called to do. We're called to light up our city, to bring flavor to our city, to point the way to Jesus, because we're the ones who know the good news of God. We know what Jesus has done for us. We know the freedom that he invites us to. Who else will tell them if we don't? As followers of Jesus, it's not enough just to be blessed. We're blessed to be a blessing. We're blessed to become agents of change, agents of the kingdom. Do you know, there are two things that I'm extremely excited about at the moment. One of them is our prayer pod. I think I'm more excited about it than you are yet, but I'm hoping you're going to get really excited about it. We have this prayer room that is open 24/7. You have to book to use it, but it is our prayer that this space will be used 24/7, that the people of God would be praying for our city, for our community, for our nation 24/7, that we would become this beacon of grace and hope in our city. Going to hear more about that in the coming weeks. But do you know the other thing I'm really excited about is that Kairos is moving next door. And when I say next door, I mean like where the motorcycle shop is next door. Kairos is our food rescue trust, our church-based community trust, which uses food as a tool to reach the hungry, those who are vulnerable, those who are lonely, those who don't have enough. And essentially, food is rescued from supermarkets and cafes and different places and given out to anyone who's hungry. And I don't know if you know this, but Kairos was started 7 years ago by one of our Vineyard ministry students. She wasn't called a Vineyard ministry student then because that's new terminology that we've just started using. It's a new school that has been launched, and Jackie White is doing an amazing job leading that. But it was the equivalent leadership program that Beth was doing. And as part of that, our students were invited to ask God for a God vision for mission. And Beth was working at a cafe and she saw all this food that was being thrown away at the end of the day. And then she would walk home and she saw all these people who were hungry. So her God-breathed dream came about as she gathered people, she cast vision for rescuing food and giving it to the hungry and building relationship with those people. 7 years later, and God has been blessing Kairos in extraordinary ways. Do you know that Kairos supplies 62 different food banks and groups? Over 26,000 people were reached through the free store last year, receiving an equivalent of 65 tons of food. I feel like there should be some gasps. Really? Like, that's amazing. It really is. There are 277 volunteers who volunteer at Kairos, which equates to 12,000 hours a year of serving our community. 850 tons of food has been rescued and redistributed, approximately 3 tons of food a day. Thank you. Now, do you know, supermarkets get very excited about zero waste, and we as Christians are passionate about zero waste because we're passionate about God's creation and stewarding it well, but we're much more excited about the people and about the opportunities we have to minister to them and tell them about the good news of Jesus. Do you know, there was a study from the University of Otago a few years ago which said that every dollar invested into Kairos translates to $4.50 worth of social return in investment. And that figure now has changed, they believe, to be more like $7.50. It's extraordinary. God is moving through this ministry, and we, as the people of God, who are going to be once again right next door, have the opportunity to be those ambassadors of grace and hope. But God's going to have to change our hearts because it's complicated. People are complicated. The only way we're going to have a desire to reach into the messiness and chaos of people's lives in our city is if our hearts are transformed first. Otherwise, we don't want to do it. But Jesus says the only way to experience true happiness and flourishing is to lay down our lives, just like he did. To pursue Jesus and his heart. And as we do that, God promises to do the heavy lifting of transformation in our hearts so that we can be people of light, people of salt who go and make a difference in our community. We can see every person who's struggling and complicated and messy as being made in the image of God. And we can remind them who they are. And we can remind them that God has plans and purposes for each one of them. We are never blessed to just be blessed. If we call ourselves followers of Jesus, we are blessed to be a blessing to everyone around us. Dave and Lizzie mentioned that we're going into another vision season. And during these legacy vision seasons, we really talk about our vision as a church family. And our vision hasn't changed. For the last 26 years, God has just been transforming our hearts over this journey. Transforming our hearts so that we have a heart for the least, the last, and the lost. After the earthquakes, we've been searching for a long-term home. We don't own this building. And in 2014, we bought an old supermarket right opposite from where the stadium is. And ever since then, we've been on a journey of raising money to be able to own the building that God's given us, this tool for mission. And I remember so clearly when we first started praying about this, our prayer was, Lord, could some multi-millionaire come into our church and just buy the building and do all of the renovations? And you know what? We haven't had that prayer answered. But what God has done has been so much better because he's changing each one of our hearts. He's inviting each one of us into what it means to be radically generous with our finances and our hearts. You see, there's no point in having a brand new shiny building in the city centre if we're not a people whose hearts are broken for those who don't know and love Jesus yet. That's what we're invited to do. It's not actually about the money, although it is about the money because we need the money to be able to buy the building, to build our building, which is starting next year. God needs to give us the desire to contribute and say, here's what I feel God's asking me to sow into this building because I see it as a tool for mission. And God, what are you laying on my heart for the mission that you're calling me to? How can I love and serve the people in your city? How can I do that in my own church family? But beyond that, when we first started praying, Clark had this picture during, Clark's our beach campus pastor, during one of the prayer times. And the supermarket that was on that site was a Trent's supermarket with the strapline, total supply every occasion. And we really feel like that's what the Lord wants to do. However people land up in our church in the city, God would supply. He'd meet their needs every single time through his Spirit and through us working as his agents here on earth. But you know, anytime we're taking ground against the enemy, and it is exciting, there is a spiritual backlash. Because we're in a battle. The enemy does not like us to take ground, and we have to be prepared for this as we go into another season. Don't be surprised with niggles and things that go wrong, because anytime miracles are happening and ground is being taken for the kingdom, there is a spiritual backlash. We had another 21 days of prayer and fasting around Pentecost, which kind of was the warm-up for our next prayer and fasting, which is coming up in August. But on the first night, the night before the fasting started, our smoke alarm went off at 3 a.m. in the morning. And it gave us a massive fright, as you can imagine. We ran downstairs to see what was going on. It wasn't a fire, it was a ginormous leak. A pipe had burst and water was pouring down into the bedroom below. And it's not an ideal way to wake up starting 3 weeks of prayer and fasting. Cleaning up and moving beds and not going back to bed and that's Ron. Is the Lord speaking? It's spiritual attack, isn't it? Yeah. We shouldn't be surprised when we seek to take ground for Jesus in the name of Jesus that there's going to be a backlash because we don't fight against flesh and blood, Paul reminds us in Ephesians 6. He says, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on all of God's armor so that you will be able to stand firm against all strategies of the devil. For we're not fighting against flesh and blood, but against evil rulers and authorities. That's our battle. The only way to overcome that is to act contrary to what the world says, to be filled with the Spirit of God, because that is the only way we can love the unlovable and we can turn the other cheek. Actually, if you go on reading in Matthew, Jesus goes on to talking about what it actually looks like to live this way. When someone slaps you on one side of the face, you turn your face to the other side. This is hard. Living like this is not easy. It's really challenging. Wanting to make ourselves available to love the unlovable, it's hard. Jesus isn't telling us it's easy, but what he is saying is that this is the way to living a flourishing, abundant life. One that will have purpose and meaning and build up treasure in heaven, and one day it'll all be worth it. The cost will be worth it. And there is something so incredibly exciting about hearing genuine stories of people encountering Jesus. And I have the privilege in my job of hearing a lot of those stories. Honestly, every single week, people come to church and they experience God and they share a little bit about what he's doing. There was a really beautiful salvation this morning, a story that's been in the making for the last 2 years. God, you are so ridiculously good. And we're invited to play a part in that, in all these life-saving transformation stories in people's lives. That's what we're called to do. So we're going to go into prayer and fasting again in August, on August the 10th. We're going to be inviting our whole church to sow into this new building. We need to raise money. Inflation's gone up. It was $14.5 million 4 years ago. Who knows what it's going to be? Our building team are doing all the hard work for that. But the cost will be worth it, and we're going to have this amazing tool for mission. And I think the fact that Kairos are moving next door means that the poor, the vulnerable, the needy will once again be in our vision, and God will expand our hearts for all those people in our city. That's what I think is taking place. The cost is worth it. How do we live a blessed life? How do we live a happy life? By laying down our lives, allowing Jesus to transform our hearts and our desires to be in line with him, so that we can be carriers of justice to those who don't have a voice, to those who've been mistreated. We're blessed to be a blessing.